Welcome. Let's look at stress. You're running late for school and your car breaks down. Today, of all days, when you have a major assignment due in one class and a midterm in another. Or maybe you're a working parent trying to get your kids off to school in the morning when your youngest can't find their shoes or the dog just got into the garbage. Perhaps you have just fallen in love and have decided to make your relationship more serious. Or maybe you have grown dissatisfied with your relationship and are contemplating ending it. All of these situations have one thing in common, and they include stress, an inevitable and unavoidable effect of life. So in this first part, we will look at what is stress and the theories of stress. So what is stress? Stress, well, what is it? Where does it come from? By definition, stress, if you will, is the physiological and psychological response to the condition that threatens or challenges a person and requires some form of adaptation or adjustment. Health psychology studies the relationship between psychological factors and the prevention and treatment of physical health problems. Psychological factors such as stress, behavior patterns, and attitudes can lead to or aggravate illness and create health symptom and conditions. People can cope with stress. Stress and pathogens interact to influence the immune system. People decide whether or not to seek health care. Psychological forms of intervention can contribute to physical health. Researcher Hans Selye, who's a Canadian, distinguished between stress, distress, and what is known as eustress. Eustress is spelled E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S. Now we'll look at that. Distress is damaging or unpleasant stress. Eustress is positive or good stress. So stress is benign. If you exhale, at some point your body's going to feel stress to need to inhale. So that stress is neither good or bad. It's just benign. It's there. Unless you don't breathe again, of course, that will be distress. Okay, so daily hassles and life changes. Daily hassles are regularly occurring conditions, and we experience that can threaten or harm our well-being. Life changes are not all bad. Many are positive and occur irregularly throughout our lives. Daily hassles can be grouped as the following. You could be household hassles, health hassles, time-pressured hassles, inner concern hassles, environmental hassles, financial responsibility hassles, and work hassles. So let's look at some of these. These hassles are linked, these security hassles. These hassles are linked to psychological variables such as nervousness, worrying, inability to get started, feeling of sadness, and feelings of loneliness. So hassles, life changes, and health problems. Now you're going to see, I think I put it up beside me here, the Holmes Rahe Life Stress Inventory and the Renner Mackin College Undergraduate Stress Scale for the kind of stressors, life hassles that can and do affect our health. Now, with the Holmes Rahe scale, a score of 300 or more units within a year increases the risk to health problems. For the college scale, it works similarly. There is a crossover point where the risk of health problems increase more significantly. Now, workplace is a place where stress is not uncommon. So let's look at that. Stress in the workplace affects 25% of workers in Canada. Workplace stress or job stress is the negative, physical, and emotional responses to a job. Now, it can lead to job dissatisfaction, and it can increase in absenteeism at work. As reported by the Canadian Mental Health Institute, Common workplace stressors include the fear of job redundancy. Now that's basically meaning that your job runs out and you won't be needed anymore. A fear of job security. Increased demands for overtime, pressure to perform. Well, this produces and can influence our lives by having conflicting motives when we are at cross purposes in regard to our goals, thoughts, choices, and decisions. Do we do this? Do we do that? So conflict is the feeling of being pulled in two or more directions by opposing motives. Now, conflict is frustrating and stressful. Let's consider 4 types of conflicting motives. The first is what's known as approach conflict. It's the least stressful type of conflict. Each of the goals is desirable. That's why they're approachable, and both are within reach. Choosing between 2 of your favorite foods is either good, but either is good, but there's no wrong answer. So that's the first one. The second is avoidance conflict, and it's more stressful. A person is motivated to avoid each of the 2 negative goals. Avoiding one of them requires approaching the other. Do I go to the dentist to repair a cavity? Don't like going to the dentist. Or do you avoid the dentist and have the tooth get worse? I don't want my tooth to get worse. So that's the second one. The third approach is what's known as approach avoidance conflict. Now, the same goal produces both the approach and avoidance motives. Pluses and minuses, good points and bad points. Perhaps you'd like to go on a great vacation. However, you're going to need to empty your savings account to do so. Great vacation, not having the money, getting rid of money that you have been saving. Avoid, could be good and bad on both sides. Now the fourth one, it's called multiple approach avoidance conflict. Each of the several alternative courses of action has pluses and minuses. So decision making can also be very stressful, especially when there's no clear correct choice. Going out with friends or staying in to study for a test tomorrow should be clear. However, it's not always. We have competing motives, the social, the educational, or the social and the personal. So one thing we can touch base on here when we move through our content is to look at irrational beliefs. Albert Ellis notes that our beliefs about events, as well as the events themselves, can be stressors. Now, Ellis's ABC approach, we'll look at what each letter represents. The A is the activating event, the antecedent, what begins, what starts the event. B is the belief about the event, and C is the consequence. If the belief of someone who loses a job is to catastrophize the extent of the loss, then anxiety and depression are more likely. Ellis proposes that many of us carry with us irrational beliefs, doorways to distress, as far as he would be concerned. Now, one other way that we could look at how we handle this is to look at our personality types. What role might they play? Some people can contribute to their own level of stress based on a general personality indicator. Now, I've mentioned this earlier, but we'll touch on it now. There's 2 types of people we're going to look at here. One is the type A person. They're highly driven. They're competitive. They can be impatient and hostile and aggressive. They feel rushed and under pressure. They find it difficult to give up control or power. They tend to hold the irrational belief that they must be perfect, perfectly competent and high achieving in everything they undertake. The alternative is type 2 people, who are, in contrast, more relaxed. They're more focused on the quality of life, less ambitious, less impatient. I think you could see how a type A may contribute to their own level of higher stress. So now let's look at the effect of stress and that effect on our bodies. There's a term or a phrase that's been pulled by or proposed by Hans Selye, and it's called the general adaptation syndrome. The syndrome is a cluster of bodily changes that occur in 3 stages: alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. Let's look at them each individually. We'll start with the alarm reaction. When the body first reacts to a stressor, the sympathetic nervous system is activated and the body prepares its defense forces to meet the threat. Now, the reaction mobilizes or arouses the body. This mobilization is the basis for the instinctive fight or flight reaction. The alarm reaction involves bodily changes that are initiated by the brain and regulated by the endocrine system and the sympathetic division of the ANS, autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system, sorry. The fight or flight reaction happens in this stage. Research suggests that not all people fight or flight. This may be more of a male phenomenon. Women engage in tend and befriend response. There's more research that is certainly being done to look at this variable because it's an important element of this model. Now, the resistance stage, which is the second stage, if the stressor isn't removed, we enter the adaptation or resistance stage, the body's attempt to restore lost energy and repair bodily damage. The person feels tense and the body remains under heavy burden. Consider your body trying to combat the stress and you're trying to do everyday things. You can be stretched really thin. And then the exhaustion stage, and this is the third. If the stressor isn't dealt with, we may enter the exhaustion stage. We become exhausted if the stressor continues indefinitely. The body is depleted of the resources required for combating the stress. The parasympathetic division activates and exhaustion occurs. Selye called this the disease of adaptation. So some of the symptoms may include allergies and hives, coronary heart disease, even death. So we've touched on this, but let's explore it a little further. What are the effects of stress on the immune system? Stress suppresses the immune system. Feelings of control and social support can moderate these effects. Now, if we look at the immune system, it has several functions that combat diseases. It produces the white blood cells, the leukocytes. They recognize and eradicate foreign agents and unhealthy cells. Foreign substances are called antigens. The body generates specialized proteins or antibodies to fight antigens. Inflammation, that's another function of the immune system. Increased blood supply floods the region with white blood cells. So if we continue on with stress and the immune system, one of the reasons that stress exhausts us is that it stimulates the production of steroids. Steroids suppress the functioning of the immune system. Persistent secretion of steroids decreases inflammation and interferes with the formation of antibodies. We become more vulnerable to various illnesses. Now, with enough stress or the quality of the stress, trauma and stress-related disorders. And one of the ones that we're most familiar with is post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. A disorder caused by distressing events outside the range of the normal human experience. The characteristics can include feelings of intense fear, helplessness, and anxiety. Revisiting a traumatic event via flashbacks, intrusive memories, or recurrent dreams, avoidance of activities connected to the traumatic event. Now, acute stress disorder, like PTSD, is a disorder that causes feelings of helplessness and anxiety. It occurs within a month of the traumatic event that lasts 2 to 4 weeks. We've just done a quick overview of this. I hope this has been helpful for you. This is probably one of those topics that might have been better to put towards the beginning for many of you who are experiencing stress of having taken post-secondary education. However, I hope this will help you in your pursuit of your continued education going forward. All right, everybody, that is the end. And these two videos, part 1 and part 2, from week 12 and week 13 are it. Bye for now.